Tucked away in the southwest corner of Illinois lies the small rural community of Murphysboro. In the summer of 1973, at around midnight, a young couple was parked in a desolate location, hoping to find a private spot for a romantic interlude. Instead, they came face to face with a huge, wet, hairy, mud-slathered beast with a penchant for disturbing teenage lovers. During 2 harrowing weeks in the summer of 1973, the rural town of Murphysboro, Illinois, became the epicenter of a terrifying series of encounters with a huge, hairy beast, which would come to be known as the Murphysboro Mud Monster. The first known eyewitnesses were a young couple, Randy Needham and Judy Johnson, who were parked at the end of 23rd Street in Riverside Park next to the boat ramp which overlooks the Big Muddy River. According to their account, Johnson claimed that they were listening to music on the radio when they heard a piercing roar, which Needham compared to an eagle shrieking into a microphone. That seemed to be coming from the thick underbrush near the boat ramp. Needham quickly turned off the radio and scanned the area, listening intently. Suddenly, another horrific shriek echoed through the night, followed by rustling in the bushes in front of them. Needham turned on his headlights as they both saw a huge, foul-smelling creature lumbering towards them. Shocked and in a near state of panic, Needham started his car and accelerated away from the scene with his frightened girlfriend. The couple arrived at the station and made out what is known as an unknown creature report, describing a beast that looked like an oversized gorilla, which they estimated to be almost 8 feet tall, with matted, mud-streaked white hair. Former Murphysboro Police Chief Ron Manwaring is still able to recite the facts of this strange incident from memory 3 decades later. Manwaring felt that the couple's account was lent credibility due to the fact that they risked exposing their alleged indiscretions, which would no doubt bring them public ridicule and, even more alarmingly, Judy Johnson's father's wrath, because they were so frightened by what they had seen by the river. There was no advantage for them to come up and report this. While the officers who took down Needham and Johnson's statement were understandably skeptical of the event, they dutifully sent out 2 patrolmen, Merrill Lindsay and Jimmy Nash, to investigate their report. Within minutes of the sighting, the officers arrived at the boat ramp in the Riverside Park area to inspect the scene. Officer Nash was the first to discover a plethora of peculiar tracks, approximately 10 to 12 inches long and approximately 3 inches wide, deeply impressed in the mud by the riverbank. Nash claimed that as he bent over to inspect the prints from a closer vantage point, he was shocked to hear a horrifying screech from the nearby bushes. A terrified Nash quickly took off, accidentally dropping his revolver in his panic. The officer, who admitted that he thought the story to be hogwash, described the hideous sound as the most incredible shriek I've ever heard. Nash and Lindsay quickly went back to the station to report their findings and gather more men for a search party. Approximately 2 hours later, officers Nash and Lindsay returned to the scene accompanied by Officer Bob Scott and Needham. The officers discovered another set of tracks near the river. Without warning, the stillness of the black night was shattered by the same horrible scream that Needham and Nash had heard earlier. Fear rapidly took over the trio of men as they raced back to the patrol car for safety. The men managed to regain their courage and continued tracking the enigmatic monster once more. They worked until dawn, trying to track down the splashing sounds, which they described as being like a large creature rushing through the knee-deep water in the distance, but to no avail. At approximately 10:30 p.m. on the evening of June 26th, 5-year-old Christian Burrill was playing in his backyard, which was located relatively close to the Big Muddy River. While looking towards the neighbor's property, he spotted a colossal, white shape looming up from behind the fence. The terrified boy raced inside, crying out, "Daddy, Daddy, there's a big ghost in the backyard!" The father was understandably dubious of his son's story. That was until the neighbors corroborated his story. Later that same evening, teenager Cheryl Ray was sitting on her darkened back porch next door with her boyfriend, Randy Creeth. While they were talking and looking at the stars, they heard a rustling in the bushes about 15 feet away from the porch. Assuming that this was neighborhood kids come to spy on them, an enraged Cheryl went inside to turn on the porch light, while Creeth, the son of a state trooper, leapt to his feet and opened the door, intending to investigate. This intention vanished the moment that the light came on, revealing the same appalling apparition that had terrified 5-year-old Christian Burrill just minutes before, as well as Needham and Johnson the previous night. Cheryl Ray went on to describe the creature. It was about 8 feet tall and at least as stocky as a football player. We were within 15 feet of it, close enough to see the body, the texture of the fur, long and hairy, like an English sheepdog. Ray also described the beast, which she claimed bore inhuman features and stood more erect than an ape. It was real tall, hairy. I think it was white, but it was dirty, matted. It had a real bad odor. It was really rank. I never smelled anything like it. It seemed like an eternity we stood there, and then it just turned around and walked off into the woods. We could hear it trampling through the woods. Randy Creeth claimed that the animal stared at them for what felt like a long time, although he later estimated that the incident lasted only about 30 seconds. Both agreed that the creature had glowing red eyes. Officers Nash and Manwaring were swiftly dispatched to the scene, where they noticed a powerful odor that quickly dissipated. They also found a cluster of footprints where the creature had been lurking. Following the officers' discovery, Chief Toby Berger immediately dispatched the rest of his men to the scene, all 14 of them, then sent for an officer and trained dog handler with the nearby Carbondale Police Department. The officers, armed with rifles, revolvers, and flashlights, discovered a trail of unidentified black slime that seemed to lead directly from Cheryl Ray's back porch to the river. Almost instantly, the dog picked up the scent of his prey and took off. The men then followed the dog down the recently forged path of broken tree limbs and trampled underbrush toward the river. The dog managed to track the monster through the dense forest and down a steep embankment toward a small pond, but the brush became too thick for it to continue. The officers began searching the area with flashlights for clues as to where this creature might have escaped, but the dog quickly picked up the scent again. The determined dog darted toward an abandoned barn, but once he got to the door, the usually courageous canine began trembling and yelping with fear. Chief Berger radioed for help from neighboring police departments, and within hours a dozen patrol cars had responded to his call. Unfortunately, or perhaps very fortunately for those involved, whatever it was that had hidden in the barn managed to slip out through the back. Not long after, the search was called off for the night, and the disappointed officers returned to their home bases. But this would not mark the end of the Murphysboro Mud Monster saga, as sightings of this mysterious man-beast were reported 2 more times during the next week and a half. Chief Berger said that during this period he was worried less about the monster and more about Murphysboro residents shooting one another in one of the many armed posses that seemed to be popping up everywhere. The next reported encounter with the beast occurred approximately 10 days later when a traveling carnival set up camp in Riverside Park. The carnival workers, apparently unaware of what was lurking nearby, chose a pleasant meadow by the river near the boat ramp, the exact location of the previous encounters. At 2 a.m. on July 7th, hours after the carnival had closed up for the night, 3 carnival workers, Otis Norris, Ray Adgerson, and Wesley Lavender, were sitting behind one of the carnival trucks discussing the day's events when they heard a series of whinnies coming from the Shetland ponies that were tied to the other side of the truck. The men quickly got up to see what the commotion was about and were shocked to find the usually docile ponies, which had been trained to give children rides in endless circles, were panicking, with their eyes rolling in terror, furiously tugging at their ropes in a desperate bid to escape. It wasn't long before they would see what the frenzy was all about. The men maintained that they saw an 8-foot, 400-pound creature calmly watching the ponies. The men decided not to wait around to see what happened next and immediately ran for help, claiming that the monster also ran in the opposite direction. About an hour later, one of the carnival workers, Charles Kimball, claimed that he saw the creature once again, staring at the ponies with its head cocked to one side in what he described as a deeply curious pose. Later that same night, a woman named Nidra Green asserted that she heard a screaming sound coming from a shed on her rural farm. She wisely chose to remain inside her home rather than go out to investigate. Following the carnival sighting, a mob of heavily armed locals gathered in Riverside Park hoping to take a shot at the mysterious beast. This only exacerbated Chief Berger's concerns for the townsfolk's safety, so he decided to bring in outside help. A group of wealthy citizens had offered a $2.5 million bounty for the creature's capture. With that in mind, a small expedition came armed with a stun gun with the capacity to take down a 500-pound animal, as well as chocolate and bananas, which they said they would use to pacify the beast. They also carried loaded shotguns, which they claimed would only be used if their safety was threatened. They further claimed that they had local zoos standing by, and that arrangements had been made for a cage to be flown in by helicopter should they get lucky and manage to capture the monster. Needless to say, this mini expedition met with very little success. Of course, it wasn't long before the press caught wind of the beast, terrifying the town of Murphysboro. The local paper, the Southern Illinoisan, ran a small story on the search, which eventually got picked up by the wire services. Lauren Coleman investigated the cases and theorized it was a type of Bigfoot. Coleman also felt that the Murphysboro Mud Monster represented a previously unknown ape-like creature, distinct from its West Coast counterparts in that it has shown to be more aggressive. Coleman stated, "There's something very unique about this eastern Midwestern Bigfoot. From the reports of the Mud Monster, it seemed to frighten people in a way that it doesn't in the West." Over the next several years, there were sporadic reports throughout the area of animals that resembled the Mud Monster. Perhaps the most intriguing of these sightings occurred on January 26, 1975, when 4 truckers, all of whom were traveling separately, radioed in reports of seeing a bizarre bear-like creature near the Illinois 149 junction, west of Murphysboro. On July 7, 1975, 2 Murphysboro men reported a sighting of a strange creature that they believed may have been the Big Muddy Monster near a pond in the Harrison community, north of Murphysboro. Needless to say, these isolated events in no way compared to the tremendous flap of encounters that had plagued the community in the summer of 1973. Perhaps Police Chief Berger put it most succinctly when he said, "A lot of things in life are unexplained, and this is another one. We don't know what the creature is, but we do believe what these people saw was real." This concludes today's episode of the Paranormal Report. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel. It is due to your continued viewership and support that we are able to bring you interesting and informative videos like this. The team here at the Paranormal Report really appreciates your support.